So greetings everybody, welcome back to Samyuzong Edinburgh for the last part of the 4 preliminary foundations. Actually that's not quite right, it's the first session, and because as you know there's 2 of each, so this is the second to the last teaching of the whole course, and the first part of the last session, which is on the topic of samsara, the defects of samsara. Sometimes it's translated as the futility of samsara, or I think we can just simply say the sufferings of samsara. Anyway, that's what we're going to be looking into. But before that, we'll start well by setting our minds and with the right aspirations and motivation, and pay homage to the lamas and the whole of the Kagyu lineage, without which we wouldn't know about these things. So yeah, we bear that in mind as well. So we'll start first of all with the source, which is the Buddha. We'll say the prayer. I'll say it in English first, and then we'll say it twice in the Tibetan phonetics, and then we'll go into the prayer for the homage to the Lama, and then for the Dorji Chang or the Vajradhara Refuge Prayer, you could say. Oh, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. O Sajay Chotang Suji Chonam La Changchu Padu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jinso Jipe Sonamji Drola Pinchir Sanjay Do Parsho Sanjay Chotang Suji Chonamla Changchu Padu Dani Chapsunji Dagi Jinso Jipe Sonamji Dola Pinchir Sanjay Do Parsho. Glorious, precious root Lama, above my head on a lotus moon seat, you care for me with great kindness. Please bestow the siddhis of body, speech, and mind. Great Vajradhara Tilunaru Marpamila Dharma Lord Gampopa, knower of the 3 times, omniscient Karmapa, holders of the 4 elder and 8 younger lineages, Drikung Taklang and the Salpa, glorious Drukpa, and so forth, masters of the profound path of Mahamudra, to the Dakpo instruction lineage, the peerless protectors of wanderers. Kagyu Lamas, I supplicate you, I uphold your lineage. Grant the blessings of your liberating lives. Just as revulsion is taught to be the legs of meditation, this meditator clings not to food and riches, and has severed the ties to this life. Grant your blessings for detachment from honor and gain. Just as devotion is taught to be the head of meditation, this meditator constantly prays to the Lama, who opens the vault of pith instructions. Grant your blessings for uncontrived devotion to well forth. Just as non-distraction is taught to be the body of meditation, this meditator simply remains without altering the fresh essence of whatever thought arises. Grant your blessings for parting from the concept of meditation. Just as thought is taught to be in essence Dharmakaya, for this meditator unhindered manifestation dawns. Nothing whatsoever dawning, as whatever may be. Grant your blessings to realize inseparable samsara nirvana. May I never in future lives part from authentic lamas and embracing ever the glory of Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of the levels and paths, and thus swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. So now we will recite the root texts, and as we did before, we'll go through all of them, the previous ones, and end with this one about samsara. And the reason we do that is because, as I've said before, this is all part of the same understanding, the way things are. And so they follow on. There's no real division, but of course we make that division in order to be able to study them. So that's why it's important at the beginning of your session, when you're doing it at home, to recite all four of them. Obviously you're going to concentrate mainly on the one that you're studying, but you go through them in order. Let me just clarify that. You don't jump ahead if you've not got there. If you've only done one, then you do that one. But now that we'll come to the last one, so it will be all four of them. So we will start with the difficulty of getting a fully endowed human life. And we'll say it in English first, and then in the Tibetan. The difficulty of getting a fully endowed human life. The first meditation topic concerns the precious human life endowed with every freedom and asset. It is difficult to get and can be easily destroyed. So now is the time to make it meaningful. Tangpo gomcha daocho rinchendi, topka jikla taret and yercha. Then death and impermanence. Secondly, the universe and everything that lives therein is impermanent, particularly the lives of beings which are like water bubbles. The time of death is uncertain, and when you die you will become a corpse. Dharma will help you at that time, therefore practice it diligently now. Nipa nachu tamche me takching, gusu droe seso jowodra. Namchi chame shitse roro jor, tela chichi penchir sampe drup. Thirdly, karma, actions and their consequences. Thirdly, after your death, you will have to experience your own karma, having no degree of control over what happens. So give up harmful actions. All your time should be spent in the practice of virtue. Thinking this way, evaluate your life daily. Sumpa shitse rangwang minduar, leni dage chache dikpapang, gewe chawe tatu darwacha, shisam nyinre rangju nielatak. And fourthly, we come to the defects or the viciousness of samsara. One is constantly tormented by the three kinds of suffering. Therefore, samsaric places, friends, pleasures and possessions are like a party given by an executioner who will then lead one to the place of execution. Cutting through the snares of attachment, strive for enlightenment with diligence. Shipa korwe nendro denjorso, dunyal sanchi tatu narwe chir, sosa tripe jeme gadantar, chentri chenne tsumpe changchub drob. And furthermore, at the end of the last one, it says, after these 4 preliminary practices, your being is now a fit vessel for further practice. So now take refuge and develop a mind intent upon enlightenment, so that whatever you do will become part of the path to liberation. So that's jumping ahead because we haven't finished them yet. We're just starting on the last one. I think all of these root texts are very concise but very meaningful, and I'm always struck by the metaphor of the execution of the party. First of all, you're in this lovely party and you think it's all great, and then the executioner comes to lead you away for your execution. And we'll see why that is such an apt metaphor as we go into it. Suffice it to say that in worldly life, all that glitters is not gold, and so we just need to be aware of the defects so we don't get caught up in them. So, samsara, the defects of samsara. It's such a nice word, isn't it? If you don't know what it means, it's such a nice word. In fact, there's even a perfume named after it. I don't think whoever made that perfume, well, I know it was Yves Saint Laurent, I don't think he could have known what the actual meaning was, otherwise he wouldn't have named it that. But anyway, we need to really study and reflect and meditate on all the different aspects of samsara, samsara actually means cyclic existence. It has this meaning of like a wheel going round and round. And it's a bit like a hamster's wheel, where you kind of get stuck on it, you can't get out of it, or it's very difficult to get out of it. That's why we really need to understand what's going on here, because otherwise you get trapped. And we might have been trapped in cyclic existence for thousands, even millions of years, who knows. So it's like if you're in a prison and you want to get out of that prison, you have to know everything about the prison in order to be able to get out. You need to know, is it possible to tunnel your way out? Is it possible to somehow get hold of the keys? What time do the prison officers come around? Maybe you could do something there. You've got to look into all of these things in order to escape. So in that way, we're kind of like prisoners in samsara. And although it's very much to do with suffering, there are pleasures also, in worldly life, of course there are pleasures. The main problem is the attachment. There's no reason why we can't enjoy pleasures as long as we keep them in sort of proportion. We don't expect them to lead to any kind of lasting happiness, because they don't. They always end in tears, because at the very least, they are impermanent, so they don't last. So sometimes you get used to something very pleasurable, and then you fall into the depths of despair when you can't get it anymore. But I'm kind of jumping ahead a bit there, but that's a general sort of shortcoming of samsara that we as human beings especially tend to experience quite a lot. So, as with all our Dharma practice, first of all, we really need to have in place the three key attributes for all practice. So what are they? There's the bodhicitta motivation is fundamental. If we want to really do our practice well and have the ultimate goal of Buddhahood, which is our true nature, to reach that state, then we can't do it just for ourselves. We should do it for the sake of all beings, with the idea of helping all beings to do that, escape from the sufferings and reach their full potential. So that's the bodhicitta motivation, which we start our practice with that in mind. Then the actual practice itself should be non-conceptual, not having concepts about it or expectations of it, but being fully focused on it. And then at the end, the dedication to share the merit of our practice. So in that way, those are called the 3 key attributes, and that means the practice is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. So now samsara itself. I think I'd like to start off with a quote from Words of My Perfect Teacher. It's just a sort of a paragraph, general sort of quote by Patrul Rinpoche. And it's at the beginning of the chapter, if you have this book, this chapter is called The Sufferings of Samsara in General. So just a short paragraph. So, we may now have a life endowed with the freedoms and advantages which are so difficult to find, but it will not last for long. We will soon fall under the power of impermanence and death. If after that we just disappeared like a fire burning out or water evaporating, everything would just be over. But after death we do not vanish into nothing. We have to take a new birth, which means that we will still be in samsara. The term samsara, the wheel or round of existence, is used here to mean going round and round from one place to another in a circle, like a potter's wheel or the wheel of a watermill. When a fly is trapped in a closed jar, no matter where it flies, it cannot get out. Likewise, whether we are born in the higher or lower realms, we are never outside of samsara. The upper part of the jar is like the higher realms of gods and men, and the lower part is like the 3 unfortunate realms. It is said that samsara is a circle because we turn round and round, taking rebirth in one after another of the 6 realms as a result of our own karma, our own actions. Whether positive or negative, all are tainted by desire, clinging, attachment. So all these beings are bound in the realms of samsara by their desire and attachments. So that's why they have to keep carrying on, going round and round. Okay, so I think that's a very succinct way to just have a general idea of what samsara is. Now let's go into it in a bit more detail. I think that we can also draw the kind of association between the sufferings of samsara and the 4 Noble Truths, which, if you remember, that was the first teaching of the Buddha, the 4 Noble Truths. And the very first truth is that of suffering, isn't it? He sees that the world, the worldly life, samsara, is full of suffering. Despite the worldly pleasures, they all have the seed of suffering. So we can see that samsara has that suffering. And then the second of the truths is the cause of suffering. So what is the cause? What are the causes of suffering? It's one's karma. And what is the cause of the karma? Our actions is wrong thinking and all the afflictions that lead us to act in negative or positive ways. The third truth is that of the path, which are the teachings, and so we find that in these ordinary foundations, and then even more so in the special foundations, and also the teachings. That's the path, the way out. And the fourth truth is that of cessation, or the end of suffering. We can say nirvana, enlightenment, and that is equated with the pinnacle of the teachings, which is the Mahamudra teachings, which lead to total enlightenment. So right now, we're at the foothills of Mahamudra. We are on the Mahamudra path, but we're right at the very beginning. But just because it's a beginning doesn't mean to say it's not important. In fact, it is the most important, because without the beginning, there's no middle and there's no end. So it is very important. So don't think just because these are called the preliminaries or the foundations that they're not important. They are super important. So now looking into examining samsara, we can look at it in different ways, but there are 6 main realms of samsara, 6 levels of being. And those 6 realms also have 6 aspects. What it means to be born there, how you get born there, what it's like to be there. So let's look at those first in general, and then we'll apply it to each of the 6 realms. So the aspects are, first of all, the first aspect is a place or a state of mind. You can always see these in these realms in different ways. So you can see them in the physical sort of place, wherever it is. But you can also see it as a state of mind. Because everything, wherever we are, we experience through our mind, isn't it? So, for example, if we have a good state of mind, a positive state of mind, even if we're in difficult circumstances, we can be still relatively have good equilibrium. Whereas if we have a very negative state of mind, even if we're in perfect circumstances, we can still see it negatively and experience it negatively. So our state of mind is all important in so much as how we experience life in general. So everything comes down to the mind. So anyway, we can see it in the physical sense or the mental sense, but definitely that we need this aspect of a state or a place of being. Then the second one is a time or time span. So how long you might live there, or because each place or each state has a different kind of understanding and experience of time. Even if we look in our immediate realm, people, if you're enjoying yourself, you say, oh, it's gone so quickly, time's gone so quickly. Or if we're having a terrible time, oh, it's dragging on and on, time's not changed. It's our understanding or our experience that has changed. If you look at the life of a fruit fly or a human being, they're vastly different. So time doesn't really exist. It's our experience of it that we're talking about here. Then the third aspect is a being that is experiencing these states or these places and this time, wherever that might be. So you have to have a being to experience it. A being with the 5 aggregates, the senses, or the kleshas, or whatever everything that makes up a being. Of course, some are more complicated or advanced, and some are more simple, but they all have to have these things to experience. Then the fourth is the cause. The cause is actually the kleshas. The cause is the afflicted mind, or the lack of understanding, you could say. One of the main afflictions is that of ignorance, isn't it? So there has to be a cause for them to be born in whichever state they're born in. Then there has to be this sort of the consequence. So it's really the consequence is to do with one's karma, because the karma is what results in a consequence. And so the consequence is wherever you will be born. The result is wherever on that wheel of existence that you'll be born, whether it's a higher realm or a lower realm or a middling realm. So that would be the consequence. Those are the main 5. There's also a 6th one, which is through examples. So we can understand these things through examples or metaphors, like the metaphor of the fly in the jar, or I've heard it also described more like bees in a bell jar. So you can have these bees buzzing around, and if you imagine a bell jar, a glass jar, and they're all buzzing around, so some of them might be on the higher part, which might be marginally better than the lower part, but they're all in the bell jar. They can't get out of there. So sometimes that can be one of the metaphors we use, or through example. So now we're going to look at these 6 realms, and we can also apply the aspects to each one as we come to it. So we're going to start in the bottom realm, the worst realm. Now bear in mind, because we're going to be talking about the hell realms initially, and so we're looking at stuff that we don't really like looking at, but remember the prison? We need to know all about the prison in order to not go there or to get out of it if we are there. So the hell realm is the worst realm that you can be born in. It has the most suffering. So if we're looking at the place, and we look at all the 6 aspects as we apply it to the hell realms. So if we look at the hell realms, if we're talking about a place, in the sutras, in the Buddhist sutras, according to the sutras, then the hell realms are located beneath our earth. And as you get deeper and deeper, lower into the earth, the sufferings increase with depth. Now this is really hard for us to get our head around, isn't it? But I like to try and equate things with something that I do know a little bit about because of my human understanding. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been down a mine, but it's not a pleasant place to be, even just to visit a mine, let alone to work in a mine. You know, you're going into the depth of the earth. It's very dangerous for a start, but also you're in complete darkness. I mean, mining must be one of the hardest jobs possible. I'm not saying that those beings are in hell realms, but it's not a pleasant place to be, surely. And that's nothing compared to the hell realms. So the deeper you go beyond that, further than we've been, then the worse it gets. In the Mahayana teachings, it doesn't particularly attribute a location to it. In the Mahayana, it really differentiates it by being either the hot hell realms or the cold hell realms. So the hot hell realms the beings there are in constant. There are very graphic descriptions in Words of My Perfect Teacher and in the Torch of Certainty, and I do definitely recommend that you read them. And it's not pleasant because we're talking about horrible things happening to beings, you know. I mean, it's like living in a world of Hieronymus Bosch paintings or something like that. But I think it's definitely worth reading because although it's hard to understand, I think we should have some understanding of it, because otherwise we will just dismiss it. And although it's difficult for us to understand what it might be like to be in those realms, don't discount it. We discount it at our risk, our danger, because if you think that there's no possibility of experiencing these realms, you might commit really negative acts thinking that you just get off with it, you get away with it. So think about, is it useful to at least be open-minded about this, that they may exist and that there is no getting off from it if you commit the acts that would make you be reborn there. So I think it's useful to have some understanding of it. That I would definitely recommend you to read about them. We haven't got enough time to go into them in detail, but I think you as individuals should go into it like that. But if we think of hell realms just as a mind state, that, as we just said, is our experience. We experience things in our mind, and people can be in hellish states of mind, even in relatively good circumstances, let alone in bad circumstances. And as human beings, sometimes I think of what's going on in our world, which we don't think of as a hell realm, not at all, but if you look at some of the experiences that people are having, or not just people, but all sorts of beings, let's just say right now in Syria, So you're living in Syria. You're suffering with famine, with bombing, not enough food to eat, nowhere to shelter. I mean, that must be hellish. Or in the Congo right now, there's always seems to be war going on, corruption, really tremendous suffering. So that's in the human realm. So imagine what that's multiply that by a lot more for being in the hell realm. But at least it gives you some understanding of what that suffering, and even just a little teaspoon of that suffering could be like in the hell realms. Anyway, whether you think of it as a place or a state of mind or a bit of both, as your understanding gets better, goes more deeply into it, then the next aspect is the body, the being that lives there, what kind of body they have, because when you get reborn into a different place, or as a different type of being, you don't have the same body, do you? You get born as an animal, you don't have a human body, and you get born in the hell realm, you don't have a human body. So you have a body that might have some things in common with human bodies, but they won't be a human body as we know it. So it is said that the bodies of beings in hell realms, in the hot hell realms, are 4 times as big as ours. And they are very ungainly shapes. They apparently have thin, prickly skin, big limbs and a big belly, and large eyes, large and flat noses, and their sufferings in the 8 hot hells, apparently there are 8 different types of hot hells, is full of extreme, unceasing pain and always intense heat. And it goes on and on and on. There are also the cold hells. So in the cold hells, the body is freezing, it's frozen and it's naked, and it's beset by ice and wind the whole time. Now if we look at the time span we're talking millions of years. So what might be one of our lifespans of, say, 90, 100 years, probably the maximum, we're talking way, way more than that, stuck in these awful realms. There's also something called the occasional hells, where the sufferings are similar, but the beings are different. They can be born in a rock or in a big fish inside another animal. And this reminds me actually, I remember seeing a film of His Holiness the Karmapa when he was a child, and he was still in Tibet. I think he was maybe 8 or 10 years old, and it was a film of him walking along with his group of monks who look after him. And he suddenly stopped, and they all stopped, and he said, he pointed at this big rock, and he said, "Oh, break open that rock." It's a big rock. I mean, it's not easy to break open a rock. And they were like, "Well, I mean, why? They had to remember it was the Karmapa." So somebody went and got a hammer or whatever they got, and he was insistent. He just refused to move until that was done. And so they did it. They smashed it open, and the rock fell apart into 2 pieces, and inside was this being, this life form, which he, with his clairvoyance, could see was suffering. And there are many instances like that. So please don't dismiss these things because you don't understand them immediately. They're not easy to understand. And because we're not clairvoyant, we don't have that foresight right now. Maybe one day we will. If you compare your understanding now to what you had when you were a child, you see what a vast difference it is. So even just in our lifespan, we see how our understanding can really grow in leaps and bounds. So please don't dismiss things. Keep an open mind. So anyway, they're these neighbouring hells, and they're kind of like satellites of the worst Avicii hell, it's called. I don't actually know what the word Avicii means, but it's the worst hell. So then we look at, well, okay, what are the causes for being born in such horrendous circumstances? And the cause for being born in hell realms is hatred, aggression, aversion. Remember when we talked about this at the beginning? All the different, the three root causes of our mind kleshas is one is hatred, aversion, aggression. But then when you act on that, what you end up doing. So, for example, we'd take a very obvious example. We'd take somebody like Hitler, or mass murderer, or somebody like that, who has hatred for other beings, who encourages the people under his power to also have hatred, and who ends up killing millions of people. Now, I would reckon that would be a very strong cause for being born in a hell realm, because your mind is full of hatred, full of aggression. Not only that, but you encourage it in others. Exponentially it grows. And so you've caused tremendous suffering. Now, there's going to be karma from that, isn't there? There's going to be big karma. And so I would imagine that would be definitely a cause for being born in the hell realms. Which is why when people commit negative acts, when we commit negative acts, we really need to watch what we're doing. We need to stop with our mind, our understanding, and make sure we try not to commit even small negative acts, let alone big ones. And if we do find that we've done something negative or mistaken, then as soon as we realize it, we should confess it and apply the antidotes. So it's not that it's not repairable, but it is only repairable while we're in this form. We can't, once we're dead, and then we go to wherever it is we're going. So we have to act now while we have this precious human life. You see, it's all interconnected, it's all interrelated. So now we'll move on to the next one stage up. It's still pretty bad realm, is the realm of the pretas. Pretas means hungry ghosts. So the hungry ghosts are kind of like deprived spirits. They're always they're always hungry, they're always thirsty, they're always wanting, they're in a state of wanting all the time. So they want food, they want something to drink, water or whatever to drink, but they never find it in this realm. They never seem to be able to find it. They're just always wanting. And they would eat anything they could. I mean, it's very graphic in the description. They say even if they could only find snot or shit, they would eat it, because they have nothing to eat. Now, I know of people in this realm that, actually children do eat snot sometimes, maybe even grown-ups do, by choice for some strange reason. But I don't think anybody would eat shit by choice. But if you're hungry enough, and I do remember one time, Akram Rinpoche was describing the hunger in Tibet at the time of the Cultural Revolution, and he said people were reduced to eating shit to stay alive. And I've never forgotten that, So, we're very fortunate we have food and everything, but you can imagine what it might be to be a deprived spirit and have nothing. But they can't even find that. And they are naked, they suffer from heat and cold. The way their appearance is, they have these big bellies, which are empty. They have these big bellies and thin arms and legs, which are often sort of dislocated and inflamed. And I mean, if we don't have such extreme suffering, but anybody who's ever suffered from dislocated joints or arthritis or something like that, you have some sort of maybe understanding of what that might be like, but this is like a million times worse. But we have enough suffering in our human body to have some understanding, a little bit of understanding, and then if you just multiply it. And also they see each other as enemies, so they're always fighting each other as well. And if they see, or they have some sort of mirage, or they see something to eat, they all try to get it. And we see this in when people are very hungry, they will fight each other for food. Of course they will. This is what happens, even in the human realm. So imagine in this realm, they're constantly fighting each other and trying to get whatever they can. And their lifespan is said to be around about 15,000 years. So nowhere near as long as the beings in the hell realms, but still a lot longer than our lifespan. So to be stuck in that kind of situation for so long must be horrific. We should have a great deal of compassion for these beings. And then the causes of being born there, well, you might guess it's greed, avarice, untrammeled desire, meanness, also like selfishness, meanness. You want it for yourself, you don't want anyone else to have it. So this kind of greed and avarice is, that's the root cause that we come down to, isn't it? The three, one was the ignorance, the desire, and the hatred, or aversion. So they're basically the three root causes, but to an intense degree. And there are many types of these beings. So there are ghost spirits and hungry spirits, mamos. They've got names for them in Tibetan, which I won't say because we don't really have that connotation ourselves. But this is why I do really think it's useful to ask yourself if it's useful or not to believe in these things. I mean, if we look at this from a kind of human, what would be the human equivalent? I guess you could sort of equate it to people with extreme eating disorders. Obviously, it's way, way worse. But you can have people who stop eating for whatever reason they have. They stop eating. They want to be thin, and they don't think they are thin, so they eat hardly anything, and they can die from that. Anorexia, isn't it? Bulimia, make yourself sick, so you're not taking in any nourishment. And then we have the opposite end of the spectrum, people who are morbidly obese because they're just eating all the time and wanting more and more and more. For might be a mental reason, not a physical reason. So there's many complexities about this. And as I said, these are just human. They're not equivalents because the hungry ghost realm is much worse, but they give you some idea of what it might be like to suffer in that way. And then we'll move on to one which is perhaps easier for us to understand, because it's the animal realm, which we can see around us. So, I think before we leave the two that we don't see, I think it's useful to ask yourself: is it useful to have some sort of understanding of these, or at least have the open mind that it may have something to some help for us? Because all these states exist as long as one still believes in a self, and I think we all still believe in a self, which is part of the third root cause of ignorance, which is belief in self, which isn't really like that. So as long as we do have that belief, these states will exist, because we have this kind of wrong way of seeing. It's hard to get your mind around what you don't yet understand. So we'll go now on to the suffering of animals. So, first of all, let's think about the animals that we don't see very much because they live in the ocean. So in our usual daily life, we'll rarely encounter animals that live in the ocean. I mean, yes, we can go snorkeling or we can go diving, but in our daily life, we don't really come across them so much. And then when you think of those animals, the ones that live in the sea, and when you think that the oceans take up 2/3 of our planet, then there's going to be countless animals, and there's no way to know how many there are, but there must be billions and billions and billions of animals that live in the ocean. And even the big ones, I mean, the big ones we know about, and probably we can count, unfortunately, because of our influence, they're declining. So, whales and dolphins and even the fish are declining because of our human influence. But I think we could probably count the whales and dolphins. I don't think we could count how many fish there are in the sea, let alone the really small animals or the crustaceans or anything that lives in water, really. But when you think of what their lives are like, even without our negative influence, it's not very good, is it? I mean, they're being tossed around by the oceans. Of course, there are different grades of animal, and some are much higher up the food chain, you can say, than the little tiny plankton or things like that. But basically, the big ones eat the small ones usually, and they're thrown about by the waves all the time. They're not terribly much in control. And then the ones that are microscopic, that we don't know anything about. I mean, the Buddha had this understanding even before we had microscopes, so to help us see microscopic life. But he already taught about these forms of life. I mean, even the ones that we can't see that actually live on our body, and our eyelashes and all over us, and bacteria, whatever, all these. But anyway, getting back to the animals that we can see. Think about the wild animals that live in the mountains or the jungles or the plains, constantly in fear of predators, killing each other. So the big ones kill the little ones and eat them up. So it's not a pleasant life, that is it? You imagine you're a sort of small animal, and the big one comes along, you're running for your life, and it happens every day. It's not like an occasional occurrence. So it's no fun being an animal. Not much fun, anyway. And then, of course, they kill each other, and we kill them. Even if we don't kill them, we reduce their land. So, for example, with elephants, they need a large area in which to roam, but we take all the land, so they can't live. And going back just briefly to the ones in the ocean, I happened to catch something on the radio today. Apparently, they're looking into passing a law about the way we kill seafood, seafish, we call it seafood, or animals that live in the sea, and particularly non-vertebrates. That's what the law is about, killing non-vertebrates, because they were talking about whether a lobster, for example, is a sentient being. I mean, I found this very hard to believe. As a Buddhist, we understand that all beings have sentience. All beings feel. And yet, it seems that there is no understanding we're talking about UK law here, but I suspect it's all over the world, that such animals have sentience. I can't believe it's even a debate. I mean, and whether to boil them, especially to boil them or bash them over the head. I mean, anyway, I just mentioned that because I heard it today, and it struck me quite a deep chord. Then, of course, the animals kill each other, we kill them for our food. Okay, you can sort of excuse that. Hopefully you would do it as humanely as possible. So not be arguing about whether or not they might feel it. I think we can safely say they will feel it. And let's not just the lobsters and the crayfish, which is what they were talking about, or the invertebrates, but the fish, they are vertebrates, you know, and when they're caught in the trawlers and they're slung onto the boat, they're just writhing around in agony, aren't they? They're not killed in a humane way. So, let alone what goes on in slaughterhouses, you know. So, and then, of course, we use them as beasts of burden. They carry things for us. Or we use them for sport. And when they outlive their physical prowess, some of them are maybe put in a field to graze, but some of them are just killed. And so it's not much fun being an animal. And so, of course, if we look at the lifespan of an animal, there are so many different kinds. So a fruit fly lives a day or something, whereas a whale might live 80 years. I don't know the exact lifespan, but I know it's quite long. And most of our sort of domesticated animals, well, and if we don't kill them, maybe they will live to the equivalent of 50 of our years. It's not unknown, is it? But usually, you know, say 10, 20, 30 years, something like that. And so, and then even the ones that are pets, you might think, oh well, you know, their life is okay. They get fed, they get their what they want. Well, they don't have their freedom, do they? Maybe they don't want to live indoors. Maybe they want to be outside or with their families. Maybe they don't want to be taken away from their families. And I very much doubt whether cows want to be milked for us. You know, they want to have their milk for their offspring, for their children. So they're kept in servitude, aren't they? The farm animals, they're kept in servitude. Some are in better conditions than others. Some farmers are much more humane and will keep them relatively good, but some of them don't. And pigs, which are highly intelligent animals, are kept in tiny little cages, and it's worse than prison. It's being just kept in a tiny little space. So there's a lot of suffering which is natural and at the hands of humans. And anyway, the cause for being born in the animal realm is that of ignorance. And I know that because there is such a vast difference in levels of animal intelligence, some of them are intelligent and very intelligent even, but compared to, say, the human potential, it's not as great. There's no way we can say it's as great. But it's approaching that. Some of them are approaching that for sure. And we'll get on to humans later, but human intelligence is not always very noticeable. We don't always use it. We have it, but we don't use it. We might do really stupid things. So just because we're human doesn't make us, if we're acting in the wrong way, we may as well not be human. Anyway, the cause for being birthed in the animal realm is ignorance, or a state of stupor. Stupidity don't like that word really much, but not understanding, basically. So those are the three least fortunate realms. Of course, animal realm is much better than the ghost realm, and ghost realm is better than the hell realm, but still, and so they're going up the realms. Now, the next realm would be the human realm, and then above that would be the demigod realm or jealous god realm, and then above that would be the god realm. Now we're going to skip the human realm for now, because we're going to come back to that later in more depth. Obviously, that's where we are, and that's what we need to know most about, because we want to get out of this samsaric way of being, and we do have the means if we use them. So let's skip from the sort of, if you do it in levels of the hell realm, then there's the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm, So we're going to skip the human realm, we're going to skip the demigod realm, we're going to go right to the top of the God realm. Now, by God realm, first of all, we need to understand it is not, we're not talking about a God as in God the Creator, which is what you'll find in many religions, such as, well, I don't have to name them, but God the Creator, we're not talking about that idea. We're talking about a class of beings who are in what we would say would be a fortunate realm, a good realm, by and large, in terms of their experience, what they're experiencing. And so the gods of the desire realm are of different types and different levels. They're not all exactly the same, just as humans are not all exactly the same. It's an extremely pleasurable realm. They don't experience suffering. They're very happy. They have everything they want. They have beautiful places to live, beautiful silks adorned, and a bit like, it always makes me think of the gods that you see portrayed in the Hindu realm, Hindu portraits and paintings, and they look so well fed and happy and radiant, and garlands of flowers, and not a care in the world, and beautiful, handsome. So, yeah, what's not to like? Now that's the problem, is because they don't have any suffering, they don't ever do anything to change. And they don't even think about renouncing what could be maybe negative. Because they don't have any suffering, they do have a lot of pleasurable experiences. And it's because they're so involved with their pleasures that they don't think, the word renunciation probably doesn't even exist for them. Certainly not the doing of renouncing anything. So they don't have the motivation to renounce their pleasures. Basically, we have to think about, okay, we'll jump to the causes of being born in the God realm. So what would be the causes of being in the God realm is generally good karma. Whatever their previous life was, they've done good things generally. So they've accumulated a lot of good karma. So they will have the fruits of that. So they were born into a very pleasurable realm. But maybe, because maybe that good karma has been just slightly tainted with some pride. So maybe they've done lots of good things. And because they've done lots of good things, people might have hero-worshipped them. They've become a little bit self-satisfied, let's say, not too much, but a little bit has crept in, so not totally pure, but basically very good karma to be reborn in a very pleasurable situation. So they're surrounded by pleasures and beautiful flowers, they're radiant. And so for that reason, they don't think about the Dharma. They don't study the Dharma. It doesn't even cross their minds because they're so busy just enjoying themselves. They don't have any renunciation to take a vow or to really generate much compassion for other beings because they're so caught up in their pleasures. And because of that, eventually their good karma gets used up. Karma is like money in the bank. If you're just using it up without replenishing it, then it gets used up. Basically, the 6 realms, you're paying off your karma. You're experiencing the result of your previous actions, but by the actions that you're then taking, whether you do positive ones or negative ones or just sort of middling ones, that's creating the next lot of karma. And eventually you'll have to experience that. So if you never think of others, for example, because you're just so caught up in your own pleasure, you will eventually become quite selfish. And then you will have used up the good karma. And it may take a long time for this to happen. It can happen over eons. So you might have, in fact, it says that the gods' lifespans are extremely long and endure for eons, kalpas. But towards the end of it, when they've used up all their good karma, that's when the suffering starts, because they have eyes of like clairvoyance, and they can see their future births. So there comes a point where they can see their future births. So their bodies, which are normally so beautiful and radiant, start to lose their radiance, start to fade. The complexion becomes less radiant, sort of just maybe a bit wrinkly. The thrones, these beautiful thrones that they sit on, start to feel uncomfortable. The flower garlands start to wilt and fade, become a bit stinky. And they also begin to start to smell, their flesh starts to smell of, or their clothes, they smell of like dirty clothes as well. So all of these things start to eventually, after a long time, admittedly, but after a long time it starts to all go pear-shaped. And because of their clairvoyance, they can see what their future lives are going to be, and that could be in the hell realms, certainly in the lower realms, and these visions that they have of that last for 7 days, but that's 7 God days, 7 God realm days, which is the equivalent in our way of understanding to several thousand years. So although they've had this wonderful time, party time, for a long, long time, then they really start to see what's going to happen to them, because they haven't done anything other than use up their good karma. They had a nice time while they were doing it, but now the party's over. So because they can see their future births, it causes them intense suffering, even while they're still in the God realm. It's said that it's like fish writhing on hot sand. That's the intensity of their suffering. So these gods, before they reach that, you could say that because they're the ones that are in the higher god realms, they're like the A-list gods, you know. Now, below that are the demigods, or in Sanskrit we call it the asuras. The asuras, they're the jealous demigods. Their causes for being born in the Asura realm is mainly jealousy, or with some envy, basically. With the ones in the higher god realms is basically good karma, but with a bit of pride stuck in there. But in the Asura realm, they've had good karma to be born in a god realm, albeit let's say the B-list gods. But they also have got jealousy because they're jealous of the A-list gods, who they can, and they're always trying to fight them and get what they have. You know, you can think of human equivalents in this, I'm sure. You know, if you've been an A-lister person, and then you see that all your wealth and glory and, you know, being hero worshipped is taken away, and then you really fall, and because you know what it was like to be at the top, then it's even worse to be at the bottom, isn't it? You might end up in prison, there's all sorts, I'm sure you can think of examples. Anyway, for the Asuras, they're like, they have a good, relatively good realm, but they're completely tortured by their jealousy of the ones that are above them, the full god realm rather than the demigod realm. So they're extremely envious and hateful towards those gods, but they always lose their battles, so end up getting killed. So that's not. that's kind of like their own doing all the time, and I suppose they still do have certain pleasures, but they're tortured by jealousy, basically. Yeah. So those are the two sort of higher realms, and then beneath those, and sort of sandwiched in between the lower realms and the higher realms, is the human realm. Now, obviously that's where we are, and there's so much to say about the human realm because we need to go into it in depth. I think one thing I want to say is that the God realm, they have virtually no suffering. The animal realms and the other realms have lots of suffering, especially the hell realms. The human realm has suffering, but nowhere near as much as the lower realms, but a bit more than the God realm. And I think that's a really good thing, because the downfall of the God realms is that they don't have any suffering, so they don't even think about bettering themselves or compassion for others or anything like that, because they're too involved with their pleasures. So a bit of suffering, and of course it's not all just one lot of suffering in the human realm. There's people suffering a lot more than others, but some suffering can act as a spur, doesn't it? Because it's when we get sick or we get ill or something bad happens to us maybe, or we see something bad happen to somebody else, that it gives us pause, doesn't it? It makes us think, oh, what's going on here? Does it have to be like that? We look at the Buddha's life, what instigated him was seeing the sufferings of others. He was actually, you could say, the equivalent of the God realm, wasn't he? He was living in the palace with everything he could want. But he went outside and he saw the suffering of others. And it was that lit the fires of compassion in him, to the extent that he went out amongst the less fortunate people and he found the Dharma. He created the Dharma. He is the Dharma, but it was that compassion at the end, seeing others suffer. So even if we ourselves are living in relatively good circumstances, we don't have to look very far, do we? We go on the street, we see people suffering, we read the newspaper, we hear suffering, we look at the TV or the radio, we hear about suffering all the time. It's too much sometimes, isn't it? We can't bear it. And sometimes we tend to look away. So of course we have to live our lives and not be brought down, but think, what can we do about it? That's what the Buddha wasn't brought down. The Buddha thought, what can I do about it? How can I relieve my suffering? How can I relieve the sufferings of others? And that's why we've got the Four Noble Truths. And that's why we've got the Four Preliminary Foundations. That's why we've got the Buddha Dharma. Because yes, there is a way out. There is a path. And there is an end to suffering, which is our full enlightenment. And that's our goal. That's our long-term goal. It's not about passing exams or something like that. So, I mean, the human realm, it's all humans are afflicted by birth, old age, sickness, and death. We all have that. And then we have many, many other things as well, because we're complex beings. So we have what we want, what we don't want, sufferings of not getting what we want, sufferings of having too much. So it is really quite complex. And that's why I think this is best left to part 2, the final part of looking at the realms of samsara, because it's too complex and we'd have to break off in the middle of it. So I think we'll leave it at that for today. But first of all, let's just explore things gently in our mind. We'll just sit for a while and reflect, meditate, and just allow things. We've talked about a lot of different things in different realms, and it's a lot to take on board. So I think we'll just do that for now. So first of all, get yourself into a good posture. Settle your body and mind. Check your posture. It's always good to check it through. Straighten up your back. Feel like the top of your head is growing up like a tree towards the light. So it's taking the weight off your hips. Then you can sit more comfortably. We'll take a moment to just relax, maintaining awareness of our posture. Gently, just feeling the body, going into the body. Make sure your neck is in alignment with your spine, your chin slightly tucked in, your eyes resting, still open but looking downwards, and have your attention inwards. You're not really using your physical eyes, you're looking into your mind. So just rest the eyes. We'll take a moment to just focus for a moment on our breathing, using your lungs, of course, your diaphragm and your belly. So you're remembering to breathe deeply, quite normally. It's not anything strange, just with a bit more awareness and using your whole body, which is the best way to breathe. Then you're less likely to be tense, more likely to be grounded and relaxed in body and mind. So let's count to 21 breaths just to settle our body and mind. And we count one in-breath and one out-breath as one cycle. And we'll count to 21 of those. Resting the mind naturally aware in its natural state, resting and allowing whatever thoughts arise to turn towards the topics we've been discussing, the various realms of samsara, the beings that inhabit them, and what it might be like to experience them. So for now we're just looking at this in a very general way. Whatever arises on these topics, just feel them, experience them. This is what meditation means, is to experience, not only intellectually. We use our intellect to reflect, and then we taste it for ourselves, we feel it with our imagination. What might it be like in each of the realms? So right now we're just allowing our mind to wander within the realms, not particularly focusing on just one. But really use your imagination to feel, to experience how it might be. Whether in the hell realms or the God realm or any of the others we've mentioned. What might it be like in each of these realms? To experience that kind of life, even as an animal. Use your imagination. How would it feel to be a small animal such as a mouse? Or a snake? A small bird? Living in fear of the larger animals, larger birds. You can really put yourself in the place of all the different types of beings. Try to get some feeling of what they may be feeling. Considering the possibility of hell realms or hungry ghost realms. Maybe start with the human equivalent of living in extremely hot conditions. The world is heating up right now. Or extreme cold. The gulags in Siberia. These human sufferings are merely a reflection of the great depths of suffering in the hell realms. Just as our earthly pleasures are mere reflections of the pleasures in the God realms. where there is no suffering until the karma is used up. Look into it for yourselves. You don't need to accept anything without looking into it deeply. And alternate the investigation with periods of rest and relaxation while maintaining awareness, resting in that spacious, limitless, natural state of mind, clear, endless like the sky. Imagination rules. I'd like to finish off by reading this little paragraph, another paragraph from Words of My Perfect Teacher, just to sum up a little bit. The more you reflect on these and similar passages, the more you will realize that no matter where you are reborn, from the summit of existence right down to the deepest hell, there is not even the tiniest interlude of real or lasting comfort and happiness. It is all without any meaning. Think about samsara and its sufferings until you have no desire for it anymore, like someone with a bad liver being offered greasy food. Do not be content with merely hearing about these torments and understanding them intellectually. Take them upon yourself mentally and experience them with all your imagination until you are really convinced of them. Armed with that degree of certainty, avoiding negative actions and taking pleasure in positive ones will come to you naturally, without having to force it. You know it makes sense. Or, well, look at it until it does make sense, or until it doesn't, and then let it go. But hopefully you will look into it deeply. And like I say, if we want to get out of the prison, we need to understand it. Excuse me. So we're halfway through this topic of the defects of samsara, and so the the topics that you'll be studying until the next time we meet. I'll just go through, recap them. So that week 1, if you reflect, investigate, meditate on the sufferings of the hell beings, the beings in hell, and what that might be like. The causes, the 6 realms, the 6 aspects, the causes for being there, all of that, everything we've talked about to do with the hell realms and the beings that can live there. And then the second week, the sufferings, the defects of the hungry spirits, the hungry ghosts, the pretas, the hungry spirits in the hungry ghost realm. Then week 3, the sufferings of animals, all the different kinds of animals, oceans, tiny animals, big animals, the different kinds of lives that animals lead and their sufferings. And then week 4, the beings of the gods, the god realms and the demigod realms. We'll kind of put that in 1 week. And their lack of suffering, and then how it's led to suffering. So all of the things that we talked about there. And not only what we talked about, but if you have either the Words of My Perfect Teacher, it goes into great detail, also the Torch of Certainty, or the Torch of True Meaning. They're both the same basic text. So they all go into it in some detail. So please don't discount anything. Just approach everything with an open mind, and do bear in mind the usefulness of having some understanding of these things that are usually beyond our understanding. So all of this is, we're going step by step. So don't worry if you don't understand everything straight away. These take many years to explore. We're talking about very deep topics here, and things that are beyond the realm of our everyday life. So we'll leave it there, and we'll finally just dedicate the merit of all our practice to benefit all sentient beings, wherever they are in the 6 realms of samsara. And you feel that genuinely, then that's a good way to end your practice and not have any kind of possession over it. It's freely shared. O sanam di tam che sikpani, tokne nye pe danam pamchene, jigana chi balap drukpai, sipe sole doa sho. Okay, so practice well, go well. And remember, this is all when we're looking at difficult topics, painful topics, it's to get out of that suffering. So that's an important point to bear in mind. Thank you.